Hello and welcome to the CrimeView FireView customer webinar series happening the third Wednesday of every month. My name is Jeremy Johnson, a member of the Tritech marketing team, and I'm glad you've chosen to join us here today. Just a little bit of housekeeping as we get started here regarding the go-to dashboard. That dashboard should be on the side of your screen during the presentation, but if for whatever reason it collapses, you can simply click on that orange and white arrow there in the corner, and that will bring the dashboard back up to where you can view it. And that is where you'll be able to enter any questions that you have about today's presentation. Just enter them there in the question queue, and we'll follow up on those questions at the conclusion of the presentation. And that does bring us to today's topic and our presenter. Today's topic, where are my points? Converting data to dots with Mark Jenkins, our implementation specialist. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Jeremy. All right, can everybody see Jeremy, can you see my screen okay?
We can see it just fine, Mark, thank you.
All right, sorry about that. My apologies up front to everybody too. I'm battling a bit of a cold here, so if there's any coughing or anything like that, my apologies. All right, we get started here. So just a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at the Tritech import wizard geocoding process and talk a little bit about how we take your data out of an RMS or CAD system and map that out into a feature class and eventually into one of your applications. We'll talk about the impact of different geocoding issues on the dashboard, advanced reporting module, or ARM, and crimemapping.com. And then we'll also be tracking, I'll show you how to track unmatched records in each of these applications. And finally, we'll talk about some of the issues you would see in your data, either GIS or RMS and CAD data, that might make it hard for us to match those records or geocode those records. All right, so I know that a few of you, or many of you, probably already know a little bit about geocoding. If not, geocoding is a process that assigns records to their corresponding location on a map. This is accomplished by matching the address in a table with a feature in a GIS data set like address points, parcels, or street center lines. So why is this important? It might be difficult for an agency to correctly identify different trends or patterns in your data if records are not accurately geocoded before being sent to your CrimeView or FireView applications. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss how missing or inaccurately geocoded records might impact this crime or fire analysis and reporting that you do with each of these applications. All right, so we'll get in here to the Tritech import wizard geocoding process. After we gather GIS data from a client, how do we convert this RMS and CAD tabular data into an Esri feature class? All right, so we start by creating or using an existing address locator. And an address locator is an ArcGIS configuration file that defines a process for creating a point layer via your GIS reference data. So we're going to use a variety of zone-based, and by zone I mean zip code, city, etc., but zone-based and non-zone-based locators to map your records into an ArcGIS feature class. So types of locators used, I have these broken down by application. The dashboard, ARM, and crimemapping.com. The dashboard and the ARM, we're going to use pretty much any GIS layers we can get our hands on in order to match or map out that data. Typically, we use address points, parcels, XY coordinates, and street centerline files. Crimemapping.com is a little bit different. We're only going to use street centerline files, and I'm going to talk about the reason behind that choice in an upcoming slide here. All right. So after we build these locators, or you identify locators for us to use, we'll load them into an import wizard profile, which you see on the left-hand side over here. It's going to be used to create a layer. So you can see I have different locators that are in here, both zone and non-zone based. You can see the name, the location, spatial reference, and then side offsets just referring to the distance from the street center line file that we want to map this. And we can talk a little bit about that later as well. Over here on the right-hand side, we're setting up what's called a waterfall geocoding process with multiple address locators that are going to map your data out. So the functionality is a little bit similar to that of an Esri composite locator, if you're familiar with that. What we're doing here is we're sending your records through each of these steps starting with, in this case, your XY coordinates. If it's not matched by XYs, it's moved down to address point zone, to parcel zone, city street zone, and so on. Very briefly, I wanted to show you the basic configuration order that we're trying to follow when we're putting together this waterfall geocoding process. So on the left-hand side, CrimeView, FireView, typically that's going to be the dashboard, ARM, or CrimeView, FireView desktop. You can see the order that's there, starting in this case with XY coordinates and moving down, focusing mainly on, locators that have zones for more accuracy to make sure that we can, match to 1, 2, 3 Main Street within your town versus a different town, and then moving down to other locators after that. On the right-hand side, again, we have just street center line address locators for crimemapping.com installations. So this multi-step geocoding process is going to run every time this import wizard runs, every time we update your data. The output of this is going to be an Esri feature class. So here we have an example of a geocoding result. This isn't real client data, it's just some critical facilities that I put together this morning. You can see the address here, IWGeo name referring to the locator that matched it. And then the big thing or big takeaway here is just the status. So if you work with this type of data, if you open up an attribute table, you can see this information. But what we're looking for specifically is going to be any records that have this U equals unmatched or status equals U. Those are unmatched records, and that's what we want to try to figure out why those aren't making it to the site. We'll talk about that in a few minutes here. All right. The impact of geocoding issues on FireView and CrimeView applications. I wanted to switch over to this and discuss how unmatched or inaccurately geocoded records might appear or impact your applications. So we have dashboard, advanced reporting module, and crimemapping.com. All of these applications are going to handle these unmatched records differently. This is just a screenshot of the Elgin Fire Department demo site. The dashboard application will contain all records, regardless of whether the record was geocoded successfully. However, the maps out here are only going to show those records that have been geocoded. So this is going to have an impact on the results of any geography-based routine that appears in your widgets in dashboard mode or in your routines that you run in analysis mode. So just some common examples here. You might be missing information out on a pin map. You might not be able to identify specific repeat locations since you're missing data that should fall in a specific spot. You might have misleading response time results if you're working in FireView. And then you might have incomplete density maps and counts in any density maps that you see as well. Unmatched records are still going to be available in your report grid. So in this case here, we're looking at analysis mode. We can see the number of records up here is 107. That's going to be reflected down here when you're looking at the table. You're still going to see 107 records. In this case, you just see 106 pins on the map. Any record that's unmatched is going to look like this within a report grid. The option to zoom to that record will be grayed out, but you'll still be able to work with this. You'll still be able to use links and relates and relate to other records if that's a feature your application has. All right. Excuse me. Moving over to the advanced reporting module. This is largely reporting-based. It's much less geographic in nature than the dashboard application. So all records should be included in the counts found in each report or tab. Unmatched records could still have an impact on special or spatial area fields if those fields are being created for your agency. Excuse me. Districts, beats, zones, response areas, etc. It might not have complete counts. In the example here, on the left-hand side, if we have, we're using the Greensboro demo in this case, the area fields here, if they're created by a spatial query, that means they're not in your RMS, they're not in your CAD system. We're creating those fields for you when we import in your data. If you use these fields as a filter, you might not have complete counts on the right-hand side here for each of these. CrimeMapping.com, a little bit different, of course. Only geocoded records that fall within one of our 15 crime type categories are going to make it onto the site. You won't be able to see these records in the chart feature. You won't be able to see these records in the report with a list of all of the crimes that have occurred for a certain period of time. Unfortunately, this is not a configurable setting, and it's in effect for all agencies that participate on the site. So missing records could offer a misleading crime picture to people in the jurisdiction or in your public for any given time. The goal is always to get as close to 100% match rate, or the number of records that appear on the site, as possible. The restrictions to CrimeMapping.com kind of make this difficult to achieve sometimes, though. We're only using those street centerline files because we want to ensure victim privacy and confidentiality. So we're not going to use any locators that would map a point directly on top of a house or an exact location. All right. So anything under 100% match rate could lead to underreporting, depending on the type of routine that you're running. That's why we encourage clients to keep track of unmatched records if they can. This is most easily done in your dashboard application. So I want to show you an example of how to create an unmatched record widget real quick here. All right, so I'm going to jump into CrimeView dashboard. In this case, again, I'm going to be using a demo dashboard for Greensboro Police Department, North Carolina. If you're an administrator, if you're a designer, this is something you can do by heading into designer mode in the application. So I'm going to go to the upper left-hand corner here, click on the shield, and drop down to designer. Now, I've created a new briefing book down here just for geocoding. And over here on the right-hand side, I'm just going to click create widget. I want to make sure this says filter widget up at the top, and we'll give it a name, just something like we'll use all dates here. For now, I'm going to choose incidents, and on the right-hand side, you can look through here. Some dashboards will actually have unmatched record save queries. Not every single one does, though. So if you are missing that query, you can come down here to add a wildcard query at the bottom. So the wildcard query is going to allow you to search any of the fields that have been configured for this dashboard. Almost every dashboard should have a field called geocoding status or geostatus, or some combination of those two words. I'm going to click on geocoding status. Under search method, I'm going to say equals. And this is where we go back to those values that we saw before, the M for matched, T for tied, C for coordinates, and in our case, we're going to say U for unmatched records. Click OK. The Where tab, I'm going to turn this off, and on the When tab, I want to search all of the data that's in the application. So we're going to switch the daytime selection method to no temporal filter. And under options, I'm just going to copy the widget name into the result layer name here. Hit validate, and we'll save that widget out. So I head back into dashboard mode. I'm going to navigate over to this briefing book that I created, Webinar Geocoding. Just have one page up here for now. Under library, I should have my unmatched records widget. So you can see no points on the map, which is good because we're looking for unmatched. Upper left-hand corner, though, it says 8 records are in this application. Just going to maximize this widget real quick here so I can have access to the table. And if I open up the table now, you can see that I have 8 records in here, which this is demo data, so we do not get any credit for having that few of records that are unmatched for the given time period. You'll see over here, though, we can't zoom to any of these records. There are additional record details. If you want to click on this, you can scroll down Again, at the very bottom, I'll just say geocoding status. There's the U that we're looking for. And then we can take a look at the different addresses in here and see if there's an issue with anything that's, and go back and take a look and see why it's not making it to the map, which we'll do in a few minutes here. We'll take a look at some of those examples. So that's how you create an unmatched record widget in the dashboard application. You can also track unmatched records in your ARM. Not every ARM application has a tab for unmatched records. A few of them do. On this page here, again, geocoding status, MTC and U. Again, that's an amazing match rate if this were real. We're only seeing those 7 unmatched records here, potentially 8. So if your application does not have this query, then the match should be the same or about the same, in this case, a couple days off from, sorry about that, as the dashboard application, since they're using the same data. If you only have an ARM application, you don't have a dashboard application, our support team should be able to assist you with finding out that information. I don't have a slide for it right now. Same thing with crywmapping.com. You're not going to be able to see those unmatched records. If you're worried, if you look at your crywmapping.com page and you feel like you should see more records on that page than currently exist, you can contact our support team, and they should be able to help you in determining what that geocoding match rate is. All right, so maybe we did this search in the dashboard application, but we want to know why the records aren't matching. There are a couple of reasons why a particular record might not geocode. Today we're going to discuss the 2 main reasons, quality of the GIS data and the address input or address information that you find in your RMS and CAD database. Excuse me. So the quality of the GIS data is incredibly important for improving your geocoding match rate. Typically, local GIS data created by your city, your county, or parish will provide the highest potential match rate. If local data cannot be provided, Tritech will use a third-party national data layer with the likely consequence of fewer records being mapped and displayed on the site. So some of the common inaccuracies that we include or we see would include things like missing street segments. So in this example here, I'm looking for 1587 Middlewick Lane. The white lines on here are the street centerline file I have. It's going to be used by my address locator. This dot here is the approximate location of this address. So if I'm just using this address locator, I'm probably not going to be able to match this address. This is an area of new development, so we would need to go in and update these or the street centerline file to match those areas that have been developed recently. Another problem we find are missing incorrect address ranges in your GIS data. So in this case, we have 745 Cowan Drive. Okay, so down here we have the GIS layer. Open up the attribute table. 745 Cowan Drive should probably appear in this line right here at the bottom. But if I go over to the map, I'm going to see that that segment doesn't actually make it all the way down to that location. So this record might geocode. It's just probably going to geocode in the wrong location. My apologies for this slide. Screen's not very clear. Missing street name or alias field. That's another problem we find. So in this case, down here at the bottom, might be kind of difficult to see, but there's a highlighted street segment here that doesn't have a name. If you open up the attribute table, there's not a name in here at all. So if there's a record that should fall on either side of this line, it's not going to be matched or mapped. So those are the 3 most common issues that we see in terms of your GIS data. We'll talk a little bit more about the issues or problems you'll find with your CAD or RMS data as well. So address input is going to be incredibly important. A lot of times in those address fields, we'll see things like common names. There'll be insufficient address entry or extraneous information present, etc. You can see some of the other issues here. I'm going to jump over to the next slide here, and then we can take a look at some examples of that. So the big one at the top, common places, instead of the address, things like Jim Williams' house or McDonald's. Those are common. A lot of times we'll see a street address with no house number, either in the house number field or in the street address field as well. Or it might just have, part of address or a partial address. In front of 53rd Central Avenue, or 53 Central Avenue, excuse me. This whole list here of examples of extraneous information present. We could do our best to try to clean this data before we import it, but it's incredibly helpful if that information is just cleaned up on the RMS or CAD side of things. Sometimes we'll see the premise included with the address, and other times we'll see addresses that don't actually fit within an address range in the GIS data or in reality, for that matter. And then the biggest one here is, of course, is going to be no address present. Without any type of address, or if we're working with your dashboard and ARM data without any type of XY location information, we won't be able to match that record. Standardization issues, or in this case, street address consistency issues, are another problem. The example here is one address, 123 North Martin Luther King Boulevard. It might appear a number of different ways in your data. So again, this is something that we can try to clean up when we pull this record in, but it's important to have some of this consistency within your RMS or your CAD system as well. So the dashboard and ARM can be incredibly helpful in finding quality gaps that might exist in your agency's data. By tracking unmatched records in these applications, you can determine if there are issues with the address information in the source data or the GIS data. It is also helpful to keep your agency's GIS data up to date in order to more accurately reflect your real-world jurisdiction. If your GIS data is inaccurate or it's out of date, you might want to talk to your GIS data provider, and that could be your city, your county GIS, or IT departments. You might also use an external vendor. Somebody will most likely need to make some edits to add in required segments or streets and to update attribute tables. Finally, quite a few of these issues can be overcome if your RMS or CAD system requires geo-validation before addresses can be successfully entered into the system. All right, so the main takeaway here, if you focus on improving the quality of the data, both the GIS data and the CAD and RMS data that you put into this process, you'll be able to unlock the full analytical ability of your Tritech applications. Thank you for joining me today. Are there any questions about anything we've discussed so far?
We did have one question come in, Mark, with somebody wanting some further information. And just to make sure everybody's aware of this, we will be sending out an email following today's presentation in a couple hours with a link to the recording for this presentation. So you will have that. But it doesn't look like we have anything further coming in at this point.
Okay.
For questions, but what we do have, folks, I will create a report and put that in Mark's hands, and so if there's any follow-up needed, he'll have the information necessary. Mark, thank you very much for fighting through the cough today and helping us learn about making data into dots, and appreciate the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and come back next month, and we'll dive into deeper functions with CrimeView, FireView. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.